Part 2 of 2 of an interview with George Webb on the Clinton Foundation and the Globalist Criminal Network.
Welcome to another episode of Our Interesting Times. My guest this evening is George Webb. George is an independent citizen, journalist, investigator who has been looking into, the Clinton emails, Podesta emails, and the Clinton Foundation.
So what's happening in Haiti is the rich are up in the north, the poor are in the south, and this middle area is where you put your UN peacekeepers. It's your neutral area. And that's where you're going to see your forced vaccinations for clinical trials for drugs. So, in Haiti, for instance, that's where the original clinical trials were for the birth control pills, and then Depo-Provera, and just every drug that's used in the United States is first, trialed in Haiti. And this general who ran the invasion of Libya is one of the people that's also on this board of this drug company doing these clinical trials, this General Grange. So when you bring in these peacekeepers from Nepal, they don't speak the language. They're there. The way you make those soldiers happy is you give them the sex trade. So there's a lot of sexual trafficking. They end up doing a lot of experimentation with these drug trials to see what the toxicity levels are. So then you have people dying from that. They harvest the organs from the people who die in the drug trials. So their kidneys may be shot, their livers may be shot from the over-drugging, but their hearts are still okay. So you see this kind of organ harvesting going on from these drug trials gone wrong. And you see the same thing in conflict zones, and this corporation that teaches these police that all around the world called DynCorp, DynCorp, is running these operations all around the world. And it's kind of a play on words like dying corpse, DynCorp.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like a CIA wink. I mean, DynCorp is the CIA. It's just this front organization to teach these UN peacekeepers to come in as police and run these sex trafficking operations. So in Syria, for instance, this can be the white helmets.
Yes.
They get kids out of the dust. The CNN takes their picture and puts them on the ambulance or whatever. And the cute kids go to UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, to princes' houses to be 6-year-old brides.
And the important thing is you have to have a country that's been destabilized, that's been fractured by war, civil war, been bombed out. The people are desperate. So it's easy to exploit them because they have very little choice. Their options are very narrow at that point. And also, if you kill off their family, you have a bunch of orphans you can exploit.
And that MO or that pattern repeats itself over and over and over. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya. There's a huge sex trafficking or child exploitation through Malta. And the way it works is the models, the beautiful of the beautiful, the cream gets kind of culled off the top, and those are the ones that go to Jeffrey Epstein's island in the Caribbean. Those are the ones that are kind of marketed to the elite of, Europe and the elite of the United States. Then the rest, go on for the regular trafficking. And then there's this kind of like the way a barrel of oil is, kind of refined is the same thing. It's the science of it has been refined down to, here's the cream goes here, the milk goes here, the chaff goes here.
Yeah. And if you look at these resource wars that are being waged by the by the Anglo-American Empire, I guess you could say, the West, to extract resources on the cheap by waging war, making the taxpayers pay for the war, or the drug money pay for the war, then the corporations come in and it's a way to socialize your risk and privatize your profits. That's what the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies are really good for. They socialize the risk and make sure that the profits are privatized. But you're after the resources. You're after whether it's the rare earth metals, agricultural land, aquifers, natural gas, petroleum, whatever. Of course, the ultimate resource is human resource. That's a disturbing term, but it's true, human resource. And they look at it as a human resource. That's a sort of a technocratic term. It's, I mean, if you look throughout war, what do? In war, you kill the men and you sell the women and children off into slavery. You know, that goes back into antiquity. It's just being continued today, just under cover of humanitarian intervention and, you know, peacekeeping and these things. It's war, nonetheless. But again, these human beings are there to be exploited, and more or less whatever value or wealth they have that can be extracted. That could be through cheap labor, being forced into a sweatshop because you've been forced off your ancestral homelands, or you can be sold into the sex trade. And judging on what your physical attributes are, you're going to go to you can be sold off at a higher price to go to end up at a, whether what you look like will determine whether or not you end up, servicing a soldier in Haiti, working for the UN, or you end up at a eyes wide shut party or something like that. Is that correct? Is that a good way to put it?
I think that's a great way to put it. And if you, I mean, I hate to put it in these terms, but if you go back to, I mean, Christopher Columbus first discovered Hispaniola, which is Haiti, and he first, Africans were first brought to Haiti. And if you look at the American slave trade, it was exactly that. And that's how, I mean, I don't mean to speak in these crass terms because I know it's so hurtful to African Americans now, but I think they also would, the scholars, would say this is true, that the beautiful of the beautiful were first marketed and then and they moved along, as far as their auction, docket was concerned. And the same thing is happening. It's only under a social justice cover. If you look at the Clintons and how they handled this, they brought in Sean Penn, they brought in the model Nemkova, the gal who was in the 2004 tsunami, the story of holding onto the coconut tree as the husband was swept away, which is anyway. She's very close to the Clinton Foundation, and then they have her she's the one of the elite, and I think she's from one of the conflicts as well. I think she's from either the Bosnia or the Kosovo. So it's she ends up with the premier of Haiti. She first is with Sean Penn, but then she's later paired up with this guy from Haiti, this popular singer that Martelli is the American pronunciation. So they come in and they have this kind of celebrity social justice kind of panache, and the media just, thousands of cameras because they're all beautiful people, and everyone thinks, well, they did great for Haiti, and this is what Braverman, and this is why I kind of stick up for Braverman a little bit. He was going to be the guy who was going to go in and actually put in these procedures to actually see if the money actually got to where it should be. And, if you talk to the people in Haiti right now, I mean, I talked to the lawyer of Aristide, who was the, the president of, or premier of Haiti prime minister of Haiti for three different times today and, all this week. She says, 2% to 5% got through of the money that was given. Some people say it's as high as 10%, but I have never heard anybody say over 10% of the money donated got through. But people say, oh, Sean Penn was here, Nemkova was here, Martilly, he's a great singer, he's a great dancer, he's the premier, or president of this, who is a part of the Clinton Foundation. He's a movie maker. He owns Lionsgate Films, and Jeff Skoll is the and he's in.
I'm sorry, you broke up.
Skoll.
Who was that? Was it Joyster or something? Joyster?
It's Guistra. He's the owner or lead shareholder of Lionsgate Films.
They did the Hunger Games and things like that.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the Hunger Games because if you listen to Kathy O'Brien, who was a kind of a sex slave victim,
Yes.
she talks of a very much like a Hunger Games scenario where she's naked and they give her a pair of shoes and then they say start running, and then all these guys start running after her. They give her whatever, a minute lead or whatever, and it's very much a Hunger Games scenario. If you look there's another movie that Lionsgate did called The Hostel, where when they find a girl, they start bidding electronically amongst a bunch of brokers. And that's very chilling as well, because it's very chilling in the sense that that's the Malta. There's a kind of a Malta connection. These Knights of Malta. It's a very small little island, but they can give away diplomatic passports, so you don't have to be intercepted when you travel internationally. And they have this little kind of bidding ring that they run. So it's very much like Eyes Wide Shut, as a matter of fact.
There's also, I think, the first Taken, with Liam Neeson.
Taken.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was involving, I think this was Albanian human traffickers, I think, if I recall, from the movie.
Yep.
So, yeah. But, so, I mean, in Haiti itself, now there's been some suspicion that Haiti itself was targeted, even to the point that the earthquake itself was was manufactured.
Well, you're getting into what people would call, conspiracy theory, but the idea of a peaceful nuclear explosion, or a PNE, and I'm not necessarily saying I believe in PNEs, but you look at the old Soviet Union, they had 725 of those during their oil exploration days. So it was quite common to put a deeply buried explosive device near a fault line and kind of set off the explosion to see what happened. So you can Google PNE or and Wikipedia, and I'm not making this up. So if a nation is doing underground nuclear testing, you may as well do it near a fault line, because if you do and you release natural gas, you follow the gas bubbles and you find oil.
Interesting.
This happened in India. So there's a couple of things that happened right before the earthquake in Haiti that are a little bit serendipitous, let's say. The person, Rajav, I believe his name is Rajav Shah, at the age of 37 years old, is put in charge of USAID, which is kind of like the second position in the State Department. And 5 days before the earthquake. Also, the Bush-Clinton fund for Haiti is set up 5 days before the earthquake. And, of course, Bill Clinton is the U.S. envoy to Haiti before the earthquake. So, if you look at the plate, the Caribbean kind of sits on this plate, between two fault lines. And, I can't connect all the dots, but I'm just saying that if I was going to set off an underground explosion, I would do it in Haiti. Because Haiti has more oil than Venezuela. It's richer in oil than Venezuela is. So, and Venezuela is the richest country in South America and Central America in oil.
And what you'd want to do is, destabilize it even more to make sure that you can get control of those resources on the cheap, which just seems to be the economic model that's been in play for several decades, if not centuries.
If you look at what happened after the earthquake, it was like an invasion. It wasn't engineers from the UN coming in or agricultural experts. It was these helicopters, Delta Force, AK-47s. It was and all over the country. It wasn't just in the Port-au-Prince area. So, and they're still there. The UN peacekeepers are still there. The coup was in 2004. so the peacekeepers are still, I think, at around 10,000 soldiers still there. 12 years later.
Now, I listened to a talk by Catherine Austin Fitz a while back.
Uh-huh.
And this idea of weaponized weather or weaponizing natural phenomenons, you can make, if you make something appear like a natural phenomenon, it's the best covert war you can wage against a country, a target country. And well, she said she was a financial planner, and she noticed that just before the tsunami that hit Indonesia in the Indian Ocean, that back in 2004, December 2004, that there is a shorting of Indonesian stock. I think Indonesia was the country, Indonesian stock, that indicated some foreknowledge of something major was going to happen.
Yeah.
And she said,
well, and they say they shorted airline stocks before 9/11 and all that.
It's creepy. And someone asked her about that. I said, well, she said, it's hard to do financial planning if we live in a world where a few men have the capacity to create, natural disasters so they can short markets. But weaponized weather, there is a UN treaty against it. So, and my assumption, if there's a treaty against it, it's broken. So.
Well, and so this is why the Kissingers of the world would want a rogue states, because rogue states don't have to play by the rules. You can say, oops, they...
Hello?
Oops, can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second. You said, oops.
Oh, sorry. Oops, we did another P&E, and we're doing a lot of secret drilling in the South China Sea. And I don't have drones, Navy drones to do surveillance, so I can't state, with, total clarity that, they're, Kissinger's doing, secret drilling in the South China Sea for China. I suspect it, but I can't really say that for sure. But I do know that the Clintons did do a lot of, Hillary was behind the underground testing in India, offshore in India, near Sri Lanka, and then also the Sri Lanka testing, I believe, caused the Thai earthquake of 2004, the Christmas earthquake. And they always seem to do it on like a Christmas Day or something. I don't know why that is.
If I recall, the tsunami was Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, wasn't it?
Yeah, the 2004. I think they do it because they want to have a lot of tourists there filming, and they want to have that tourist angle, and the people, the victims are all, tourists, and here's their stories, and that's kind of like the human interest cover for the P&E. They just had one in Papua New Guinea on Christmas again. It's always Christmas, They love to do it on Christmas when people are vacationing, I guess. But I really do believe, Mark Rich did this. The reason why the Israelis got the nuclear capability so early was they were I believe the Israelis were, and this is coming from an Israeli, behind this, that we were the P&E. There's a lot of explosions around South Africa near the South Pole where they create these, there's this double flash that happens, as the, I don't know why it creates a double flash, but the cloud collapses in on itself and then re-explodes. And it's a very distinctive signature. So when people see that double flash, I don't know, what is it? I think it's a nuclear explosion, but I don't know. I can't prove it. Prove it. Yeah.
So what we got here, again, you've with your research, you've kind of laid out this. It's almost like a lattice work of these interesting connections and connected events, various assassinations. You talked about this the death of Monica Peterson, which hasn't been explained yet. She wrote a thesis on human trafficking, and she dies while she's in Haiti investigating this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. the conspiracies theories are fun to talk about, if nothing else. But back to the brass tacks of the investigation. Yes. So this gal goes down there. She's been to, I think she went to 22 different countries, and in her doing her master's thesis, and she's 32 years old, and she's just quite the the writer. I've read a lot of the things she's read, and she goes to Haiti. I think she's been there a couple of times, and in January of last year, so this is about 12 months ago, she writes, "Wow, all this negative Clinton stuff. I'm here at this industrial park they built, and it seems more like, a sex trafficking, sweat sex shop. And I'm over here at this gold mine, and it seems like, they're denuding the country of their resources." And she starts turning away from her kind of like training or her indoctrination that she was getting at this school at University of Denver. And she starts getting more into this, oh, this isn't really what it was. It's kind of like, I'm not in Kansas anymore. This is really nasty stuff. And then there's this black hole of, we don't know anything after that, those March postings on social media. And most, 32-year-olds, they're on Facebook all the time, especially if they're traveling to a different country. And they're, taking selfies of themselves and so forth. We don't have her anything past a year ago. She's killed, well, she supposedly commits suicide on November 13th last year. But hanging. But we don't have a police report. That's odd that no police report would be filed. It's odd that the Secretary of State or none of the people in the State Department would inquire to why, as a 32-year-old who's very happy, who her parents think she was murdered, why they wouldn't at least inquire to get a police report. So there's a lot of questions. And so what I do in the series is really try to, get public help, research help to, find out who killed Monica Peterson.
So the official report, the official narrative is she committed suicide by hanging.
Yes. Like
Deborah Jean Palfrey, right? The D.C. madam.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah. Same. She hung herself. The David Carradine thing. It's just this kind of go-to when the guys at the whiteboard kind of forget or can't come up with something better.
Now, this is pretty disturbing stuff, sinister stuff. What we're hearing about the not just the exploitation of people. We're talking about the literal harvesting. Sex traffic is bad enough, especially when you're dealing with children. But then we're talking about you're creating conditions where you can literally harvest their organs for wealthier people, I presume. And I guess we're hearing this in America. We're thinking, well, this is horrible and all, but this is what's going on abroad. They would never consider doing this to us, would they? They don't think of this way. Well, perhaps they do. We had the case here where, I don't know, you're familiar with the case of Georgia State Senator Nancy Schaefer?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exposing the Child Protective Services. And she tracked the money, followed the money, and basically people being paid to take kids from families under the slightest pretext of neglect, putting them in foster care where they can be abused, drugged, and sold off. And, of course, she commits suicide. Now, I'm sorry, her husband kills her and commits suicide. It's a murder-suicide.
Yeah.
Right? Both. Because she's exposing this corruption, Child Protective Services. So, unless you think this is something that's only occurring in the, the outer reaches of the empire, it's occurring in this country too.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody to just. I have the Nancy Schaefer citations in my sources. Mm-hmm. So just listen to this woman for 5 minutes, or 3 minutes at a World Congress of Families or whatever, and she's just like this grandmother who cares, and she's saying, the mother had a fight with the father one day at a barbecue about, not having enough hamburgers or something, just some slight little thing. And then CPS came in and just yanked the kids at first time having an issue and so forth. And just so happened the kids were beautiful, and they ended up being involved in all these, horrific things. And I think you're going to find there's going to be a lot of cases where people have gone crazy, like a Myron May, who was he was the assistant district or assistant attorney general of New Mexico. He's the one who blows the whistle on Jeff Epstein's Zorro Ranch. The Zorro Ranch is this big compound where Jeff Epstein's flying these DynCorp helicopters, and he's flying these Sinaloa guys to this remote ranch, and they're having all this sex trafficking. They're having these parties with El Chapo and everybody. And these people are targeted. These people who are whistleblowers are targeted in the U.S. with intimidation campaigns and surveillance and harassment until they basically can't take it anymore, around the clock, because they're exposing the stuff that's happening in the U.S.
They're gang stalked, and some suggest even they're subjected to some sort of electromagnetic, torture, or putting like voices in their head.
I don't have any experience with the stuff, the weapons, the electromagnetic. But, from what I know of MK Ultra, where everything you would never have imagined was done.
Yeah.
I don't disbelieve the people who say, oh, they don't like me. They came in and, microwaved me. But I don't have any experience with that. But I do know that Hillary did, and Bill Clinton signed off on a memo that's called Presidential Decision Directive. They call them PDDs, Presidential Decision Directive 62, which specifically calls for a disruption campaign like the old COINTELPRO. And it specifically states, I have this in my presentations, the CIA to give their best stuff to the FBI for the U.S. to disrupt targets in the U.S. And you say, well, that's really great if they're using it against terrorism targets. But no, they're using it against people who are calling out these abuses.
Yeah. And we also have another example of this human harvesting could be the privatized prison industrial complex, even just the prison industrial complex, because Clinton played a big part of that in his crime bill, both in Arkansas and as president, because under his presidency, the prison population exploded. At the same time, under the guise of the drug war, at the same time that these prisons were being privatized, and a lot of these corporations, like the Corrections Corporation of America, in their prospectus, require like a 90 to 95% occupancy rate in their contracts with the states. And what happens is, what ordinarily, if it was being run by the state, you're talking $15,000 to $20,000 a year per inmate. But they have these contracts that are spending $100,000 a year per inmate. So it's a huge wealth transfer. It's just like, why do we have $6 trillion missing at the Pentagon? Why does the F-35 cost $1 trillion? This money's being funneled off somewhere. It's going somewhere. It's embezzlement. But the sinister thing here is you have these under the guise of law enforcement, drug sweeps. They go into poor neighborhoods, black neighborhoods usually, and sweep people up. And these people can't afford legal counsel, and they plea out, and they're in prison. And once they're in prison, well, one thing, their warm bodies create profit for these corporations. At the same time, their labor is sold. A lot of them are put to work, producing Kevlar equipment for the Army and stuff like that. And they're being paid nickels a day when the company itself is making $100 a day off these people's labor. And this is all like a business model, but it's the same principle. Wouldn't you agree? It's being operated.
Oh, absolutely. One of the best statistics I ever heard to compare what has changed in the same family. So George H.W. Bush does the Gulf War I, and the ratio of soldiers to contractors is 33-1. So a few contractors.
Mm-hmm.
David Petraeus is running Gulf War II. The contractor to soldier ratio goes to 1-1. And then toward the end of the conflict, it goes to like 3-1, where there's 150,000 contractors there still, and there's only 50,000 soldiers. And that I love comparisons like that because it's just in the same family. You go from George Bush, the dad, to George Bush, the son. That whole privatization of war, prisons, domestic surveillance, domestic harassment, the whole criminal justice system with contractors. The intelligence community is mostly, I think about 65% private contractors, Booz Allen, so forth, security services, G4S, DynCorp, Serco, all these names. And, if Trump did one thing, it would be just to say, okay, all contracts are off right now, and you're going to have to rebid everything. And come to me with a proposal, and let's just talk about this again, because what are we doing? Because if like you said, if I'm paying a guard at a cross gate, the contractors are not just serving meals and doing the things. That was the whole idea. They were going to do the stuff in the background, and we were going to have more people at the tip of the spear. That was the original Donald Rumsfeld argument for contracting. No, these guys are a guard at a checkpoint. I can pay that 18 or 19-year-old guy from Nebraska, $20,000, and instead of a Blackwater guy at $80,000. Mm-hmm. And if the number one thing Trump could do right off the bat is just say, okay, no contractors for right now. Let's fill the ranks as much as we can with the Army. And they've been trained to do this for 30 years, or 50 years. So that would be my one. If I had a Trump call out, that would be my one.
So it's just a huge wealth transfer, wealth extraction scheme here. It's just plundering it's the plundering of humanity. That's what's going on there.
Yeah, and anytime you get any kind of gross overbilling, you're going to have, and that's what everyone, it's so difficult for people. Do you want good college education? Of course I want good college education. Well, we're going to increase the price 30%. We're going to take 25 for ourselves, and we're going to give the professors 5. But if you vote against it, you're voting against education. So
I always say, someone says you can't put a price on a good education. That's funny. They do.
Yeah.
No problem putting a price on it with interest. That's a whole nother. That's a whole other predatory lending. I mean, you talk about micro lending. Awful that is. And I think there's a similar scheme with student loans. If you burden someone with debt, you can control them. Burden someone with debt, the third world, you can turn them into sex slaves and make it appear to be voluntary because their options are so narrow. You've made them desperate. The same thing you can do with a whole class of, a whole generation of kids, young adults who are saddled with debt coming out of college and don't have any good job prospects. They're not going to form families, and they're going to work for much less, and they're not going to have leisure time to think or develop any real human capital, intellectual skills, and that's the type of dumbed down masses that the elite perhaps want.
Well, I think social justice videos. I think be a barista by day and then do social justice videos on the weekend, and that's you can make a video about Haiti, about how great it is in Haiti, and Sean Penn, and do a couple of cut-ins of Beyonce and Jay-Z, and then you're good to go, and then have a latte.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the people actually on the ground, it's a very different story. And I think this generation, we're talking about millennials now. All of a sudden, the curtain, Toto pulls the curtain back. At some point in the process here, they were all Bernie. But then I think the Podesta emails, really uncovered this whole, just deception and back dealing and all this subterfuge. And something happened with the millennials that said, I'm not buying the social justice film anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm digging. And I think there's that really has changed with Trump. Now Trump, I think, has this whole nother set of challenges, but at least, I was in my conversation with Seymour Hersh today. He said he, to his credit, eliminated 2 generations of political machines, the Bushes and the Clintons.
Yeah, the two principal political crime families who were always in partnership. That's a whole other thing. The Bush-Clinton partnership reveals the true nature of I think, of the political system, this false left-right Republican-Democrat paradigm that we live under, because they work in tandem. It's
And it goes back to that teeter-totter that I was saying before. If the Bushes are in power, we get 60% of the take or 70%, and you get 30. I think it's more like 60-40. If you're in power, you get 60, we get 40. So there still is a fun competitiveness to winning the presidency.
Yeah. I mean, it's competitive within the arena. As long as you're playing within their arena, they'll allow a certain amount of blood sport competitiveness, but really you can't get out of that arena. You got to play. You got to be part of the gladiator games. That's play by their rules.
And that's why that's why you saw the Jeb Bushes and the George Bushes and so forth going against Trump, because it was like, hey, wait a minute, this is where we might get zero, and before they had both sides of the table covered, and I would say 60-40 is probably the right split. So they didn't have too many big arguments, but every once in a while they had the Valerie Plame argument. They'd out somebody on the other side and, say something nasty. Joe Wilson would say, you don't have weapons of mass destruction,
Yeah.
But that was kind of mild stuff,
Yeah, it was a tempest in a teapot, it really was, if you look at the bigger picture, which I think you've exposed with this video series. I mean, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by it all, but you've laid it out well. And the bigger picture, looking at a very sinister business model that I think has been around for centuries. I'm thinking the British East India Company, perhaps, and I'm thinking, what was it, that character, Jeremy Bentham, who wrote an essay in defense of pederasty and also one in defense of usury. And there might be a connection between the two.
Well, I definitely think very much so. I mean, now we're getting philosophical,
yes.
But you're right on the deal, because if you go back to the original Skull and Bones, and I know everybody at Yale hates me when I say this, it really was this: we're all going to get arrested here because we're American opium runners that are competing against the British opium runners, and we're undercutting them because we sail better. This is where the Americas kind of comes in, and,
the Clipper ships, yeah.
And it all goes back to this collapsing a civilization in order to get the drug revenue.
Just because
you want to tea chests,
right?
We're filled with opium.
You want the porcelain, you want the tea, and you don't want to part with your gold and silver. So let's just destroy the society with opium. Yeah.
There was the Chinese government finally said, look, the opium wars and so forth, we're not going to give any more of our gold. We've almost lost all of our gold to you because of this opium trade, and that's the opium wars. And if you look at that business model of just, I call it the straw, just take the straw and just suck everything out that you can until it's a complete corpse, there's nothing left, and then move on to another country.
Yeah.
That whole exploitative model. And the stuff you're talking about, Jeremy Bentham and all that stuff, these kind of like essays in Time saying, what are we doing? What are we doing?
And I mean, if you look at the whole banking system where you have the debt-based fiat currency, that is a method for wealth extraction.
Mm-hmm.
Money, it's no longer a store of value, nor is it reliable. It literally is a debt mechanism, because every dollar that's put in the economy is backed by debt, which ultimately people have to pay interest on. And that is wealth extraction. It's compounded interest that ultimately collapses everything. And maybe that's part of the plan. They want to, collapse, make you loan people money, which they create out of thin air, then secure the collateral.
When you start talking about finance, sometimes people glaze over. And so what I always try to do is come up with a story that kind of is apocryphal. And Gaddafi is interesting, because Gaddafi is kind of like the replacement Saddam Hussein. He's the illegal oil trader that the Bushes are going to use as a replacement for Gaddafi, right? Or for Saddam. And he accumulates. He's making $40 billion a year in oil trade, and he's putting it all in HSBC, and it's piling up, piling up, piling up. And now people are saying, "Hey, we're going to topple you, or we don't like you." And he's like, "I got nothing. I got a bank statement from HSBC that says 250 billion, but that's not really 250 billion."
Mm-hmm.
So, because they could take it and seize it at any time. So he has somebody whispering in his ear saying, convert it to gold. Convert it to gold. Gold is always negotiable. And then bring it into Africa and create this Africa gold-backed money. So we're going to have an Afro-dollar, okay? Or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Afro-franc or Afro-euro. So there's, this is the whole Mossad. I have a little bit of connections to the Israeli thing, but this is Israeli folklore now. But you convince Gaddafi to bring in like 150 billion or 100 to 150 billion in gold, and you have it stored all around Africa, most of it being in Tripoli. Then you topple him, because when you topple, you get the gold, and there's no transaction, there's no shell corporation. All you need is guys with trucks,
Yeah.
like with Saddam. The same thing happened with Saddam, is convince him to put it in the gold, then you topple him, because then it's just all trucked away, and there's no audit trail. So anyway, this is the working theory that I have, and a lot of other people do, that they were the whole Gaddafi gold-backed currency thing was just to get him to create the central bank with a whole bunch of gold. There's even emails between Sid Blumenthal and Hillary where he says, we've identified 9 billion of the gold, but he can't find the rest of it. And there's this kind of mad scramble. Where's the gold? Where's Gaddafi's gold?
And you have like different intelligence services trying to locate it?
Yeah, so the thought is maybe they're working with Sarkozy, Hillary's working with Sarkozy and French intelligence, maybe British intelligence, and they're all trying to figure out where the gold is. Still could be out there. It might all be in, Malta. We don't know. It's one of the kind of the interesting mysteries to the Libya topple. It's kind of a fun side story to the topple.
Well, again, it just all that trouble in Libya 5-6 years ago, Resolution 1973, responsibility to protect, all that BS. It's just a looting operation. They don't care what type of. In fact, they want to create the mayhem and misery, because that serves another part of the plan. Perhaps the weakening of Europe, this migration crisis. This can, weaken the euro and prop up the dollar. This can do all types of things. If you're a currency speculator like a George Soros or something, if you have plans to weaken, certain states, Israelis have had plans for that. The Udon plan, the microstate plan, which Brzezinski has also endorsed, and Brzezinski's more of a Atlanticist rather than a Zionist. He's not a Zionist. He's more of a realist, I guess, technocrat. But all types of agendas can be pursued under this plan. But the bottom line is you have these, I guess, self-appointed princes infesting palaces, planning wars, and it's the little guy that suffers. I think it was H.L. Mencken that said that war isn't made by the little guy scratching out a living in the fields. Wars are created by princes infesting palaces, and that's what we have here.
Yeah, that's good. I like that, H.L. Mencken. Well, one of the interesting things about Libya, and this gets back to the Valerie Plame thing. One of the things you have to do in NATO is to get all the air power guys, the air generals, the Air Force generals, to agree that your plan is the way to go. Because if you're going to do a covert operation, you need that air power, because you got these, General Grange has these the guys in the Benghazi movie, they have these Delta Force guys that can have these laser sights. But if they laser sight some colonel's window, you need to have a jet come in, a Mirage jet or an English jet or an Italian jet, to hit that target. So you need to set this thing up years in advance with these NATO guys. And the NATO general that ran that campaign was from Canada. His name is Bouchard, and you're going to find he's running the F-35 campaign right now, which was another plan to get consensus and agreement on Lockheed and so forth. But anyway, Valerie Plame, when she's running the let's call it the NATO party circuit, she's bringing all these people in and compromising all these generals 20 years ago. So she really is, I've read her book, Fair Game. Every other sentence is bleeped, because it gives away a state secret. But she really was the Mata Hari of NATO, and she hasn't gotten appropriate credit because of the whole WMD thing that happens 10 years later. But anyway, Bouchard goes on to NORAD, and NORAD in Colorado, the whole in the mountain thing and withstand nuclear attack and that's kind of like a CIA. The CIA moved from Washington D.C. out to Denver, and they built the big Denver airport, and then underneath is this huge CIA complex.
Yeah.
So the CIA has always kind of had this Dr. Strange-Lovian thing about mine shafts and 10 women to every man, and we're going to survive. That whole thing.
Kubrick was revelatory with that. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole Kubrick thing, and the
women would have to be extremely attractive to allow for procreation, and of course the one we would have to do away with the monogamous relationship, and all the generals go, "Oh, that'd be a shame."
Yeah.
And the Russian bastard goes, I find your plan very interesting.
Yeah, I can't remember the Russian guy's name, but these Harvard papers, these Harvard think pieces that Henry Kissinger did as a young man are finding life. The whole Denver airport and the whole complex out there, and the whole the mine shaft and the underground thing. It all came to life right out of that Peter Sellers wheelchair scene, and so all these programs that are being developed at the University of Denver right now for these kind of sexual entrapment, with all the cameras, these brownstone operations in the U.S., has kind of come down from the elite down to the kind of the local level.
Yeah.
With local police forces and state police forces. So we're going to get our governor, and now we'll get the mayor, and now we'll get Joe Schmo down the street. And this kind of we versus they, thinking, with the fusion centers and so forth. And so, all this stuff that's developed overseas with the CIA and so forth just has this weird blowback. It just always ends up coming back to the FBI and getting, kind of inserted in our daily life here.
That's right.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, because if you look at DHS and the fusion centers, the prototype for that was the Phoenix operation in Vietnam. Yeah.
Well, and the guy who ran the Phoenix operation, one of the key guys was David Grange, same guy who toppled Libya.
Wow.
And he was running Delta Force and doing all this stuff. And of course the CIA was, that was their baby, about counterinsurgency. And the only real innovation that's happened since then was David Petraeus, which was the coin counterinsurgency, which is basically kidnapping instead of, and torture versus just, night operations where you just kill everybody. And, and playing one triad against the other is the only innovation really that's happened in, since 1973, or this goes back to 1965. So, yeah, it's, and I look at Haiti and I say, oh my God, is this that one Kissinger paper where I thought he was on, mescaline, where he talked about depopulation? And are we doing that one too? I couldn't believe that we did the Denver thing with the mine shafts. Are we going to do the depopulation in Haiti? And it seems like Hillary is. I'm talking about the depopulation paper.
National Security Study Memorandum 200, 1974, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. you basically you reverse whatever developments occurring in the third world with you use food, energy, and debt as a weapon, and it's weaponized. And that's what that was aided greatly by the 73 war, which some people think Kissinger fomented. Decision taking at Bilderberg. That's Bill Engdahl's thesis, which is rather compelling.
Engdahl? Yeah. So Engdahl's always right. That's the first rule. And Engdahl is kind of like Kissinger's, those puppets, the guys are puppeteers where the puppet's always saying the nasty thing.
Yeah.
Engdahl is Kissinger's nasty puppet. That's not right, Henry. You started that.
Yeah.
I mean, no war. I mean, the only one, I think that maybe you could argue over is 67. But the whole secret pipeline, the whole secret oil pipeline was a Mark Rich, Henry Kissinger thing. And the whole, buying the embargoed Iranian oil and bringing it through and selling it on the European spot market. That whole thing, and the same thing with the South African oil. That was all Mark Rich and Henry Kissinger. And I'm, like I say, I'm not a citizen of Israel, but I wanted my two kids to serve in the IDF, and I'm pretty Israeli. But I got to say the truth, which is that was the truth.
Well, yeah, these embargoes. It's the same like prohibition. It's an excuse to allow for a few people to profit off the embargo, same way that drug prohibition enables a few select cartels and intelligence agencies and banks, particularly Wall Street and HSBC and Wells Fargo, to profit off all the money that's raised through the illegal arms trade. Because that too, but the illegal drug trade, because all the profits have to go somewhere, and they go into Wall Street, they go into the banks, and they provide much needed liquidity into the banking system, which then they can through the fractional reserve banking system, multiply 10 to 1 with their loans, with more debt. So
I'll boil all that down. And your command of this is far beyond mine. But there's an old Jewish joke that says, what do Jewish kids do on Christmas morning? They all go down to their dad's toy store and look at the empty shelves. So that's what we used to do. No, and I know this. I'm a Zionist. Come on, so don't get on me. But here's the Jewish joke. It's embargo plus 25%. So we love the word embargo plus 25%. And Mark Rich would laugh at that. If I was sitting here with Mark Rich, he would laugh at that. And and nobody believes more in the Jewish state than I do, and make the desert bloom. But you know what? If you have a secret pipeline going through Beersheba, it makes the desert bloom a lot faster, and you can build a lot more fountains at Ben Gurion University. So, I'm not going to sit here and say, that we didn't have our hand in a few honeypots. So, embargo plus 25%. We love embargo. It's kind of like saying a sale. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, listen. Anything else any other thing you want to touch on? Did we cover it well enough, do you think? Or
I do. I think we had a fun chat, and Tim, it was great. And it's great bringing up a subject and then having somebody who can go, so much deeper and so fun. And your listeners are so lucky to have you as a host, because you're just so well, so well educated on all these topics.
Well, thank you. That's very, very nice of you to say. Your work is. What you've done, this is fascinating. It's overwhelming, and that's why when I did this interview, I didn't quite know how to handle it, because it's so vast. It's such a big topic. It covers so many, I think, dimensions into the modern world, and why the world is so messed up today. So it's I didn't know where it was going to go. But again, I think it all goes back to this idea of harvesting humanity. And that seems to be an ideology or a way of looking at things that's been around for at least 500 years. Well,
and I would say to the flip side, is my this open media research is a way of calling all that out. Is a way of it's Diogenes' lamp. It's a way of just bringing in the sunshine, bringing in the light. And as Hillary said, sunlight's the best disinfectant. And this, if you can go to the site and even contribute one citation or one source, it adds to this cumulative effect, and you just can't get away with it anymore. What CNN is hoping you do is look at it as a fireworks show and then go home and then say, "Oh, I really didn't learn anything." And what I try to do is build on the day before so that you really have a sense of understanding and a sense of hope to be able to contribute to kind of end the game, to put this game to an end.
Yeah, because we're stuck in a loop. It's sort of a bloody dialectic here, and that's got to stop at some point, because where does it end? You mentioned, is there a website that you direct people to go to if they're interested in this, other than
if you just want to go to George Webb on YouTube, I think it'll come up, or George Webb. The series, I've changed it since Braverman's now at the Google Foundation. I've changed it to Braverman, Haiti, and Me, sort of based on the Michael Moore Roger and Me.
Oh,
where he kind of followed him all around until he got an answer. Yeah, so that's the new series title. So if you say George Webb and Braverman, you'll see the channel.
Great. Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank you for spending so much time with me this evening. It was great. It's fascinating, disturbing, all that. It's just
all at once.
It's a bit, so is history. It's all
very,
It's very, unfortunately, it's all very interesting, as they say. So it's too interesting. Yeah. So, well, great. Listen, thank you, and I'll wish you good night, and good luck with your continuing research. I'll follow it. Thank you.
You are listening to UCY.tv. Why don't you